Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the iFlight Tachyon 1108 5000 kV motors. As you see there, we take a look at the wire length. I'm trying to do things a little bit more organized this time around because last time I got too excited about the motors and I put them on and I ran them. So you get to see the wire length here, which looks like it's 135 millimeters according to my little chart down there. So lots of length, and it is nice silicone. It's not very thick by any stretch, but it should be fine for 1100 series motors. Hopefully we can get a close picture of the magnets here because we do have an open bell design. So we get to look at the magnets there and see the air gap and the windings a little bit. Hopefully that gives you all the information you need. You see the C-clip there on the bottom. We can see a little bit of the bearing and then a profile shot here. They are pretty notchy motors. Not terrible, not like the Sunny Sky. You might remember these guys, these blue ones over here. The Racer's Edge. And then we've got our top pattern for our mounting holes and the spokes and how they've designed for the air cooling, and then you get a little bit of that shot there as well. Let's go ahead and weigh them up. So relatively heavy there at 9¼ grams. So you might be familiar with motor testing and putting them on a rig and then doing the static testing. I'm not a big fan of that because I spent a substantial amount of time researching motors early on when I started making videos and looking for more performance. And while those numbers give you a baseline, they don't tell you about many aspects of the flight of the quad. They don't give you any torque. They can't tell you if they're vibey because they're not balanced very well with the balancing mud inside the bell. So I like to stick them on something. I like to fly them. I like to tune it and just see how it feels as a pilot rather than doing a sciencey static thrust test. At 9¼ grams, this is probably the heaviest 1100 series motors that I have any experience with. So I'm going to go ahead and put them on my test rig, which is this little guy here. I mentioned this in the last video. This is the Flyfox frame. It's the 135 millimeter. It can run 3-inch props, but I run 2.5-inch gem fan props on it. These props right over here. You can see I just took them off. I'm going to go ahead and use those again. And I've got the flight stack, which is the Speedix IS-100, and I do have the soft mounting on the bottom. These are rubber down here. They kind of move around. You might be able to see that a little bit. And then I've got these little green O-rings at the top. I've built a few of these test rigs, and they're all kind of the same. I'm using basically the same frame, same flight stack. The real main difference is the different cameras, because I just put whatever cameras laying around. That's not all that important to me. And as far as this frame goes, the camera protection isn't outstanding, but it's better than my old test rigs. My old test rigs, more the camera stood out, so I think that this was better, and that's why I moved to it. It's also easier to work on than my old test rigs. I had to take a lot of screws out in order to get to the ESCs and to work on it, so I kind of got tired of that. That's why I switched over to these, and it does have good thick carbon fiber. Well, I don't know how good it is, but it is thick. Who knows about the carbon fiber? I don't study that stuff. I just fly it and crash it, and if I crash it and break it, then I get a new one. So I'm going to put these motors on here, and then we're going to go for a flight. The first thing I should note is, again, I am flying on the China Hobbyline 4S 450 milliamp battery. There is a second flight video that will follow this video where I fly on a G&B 550 4S. And I flew on the 550 G&B 4S just to find out what the flight time difference would be like between the different sizes of batteries. You can also hear, hopefully in the flight footage, how the motors sound. They sound fairly interesting. They're almost like a little bit of a squeak to them. And I've heard that from other motors, and I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this comes with 1107, 1108 style motors. I've heard it before. Maybe it's just 1108 that has that squeakiness to them. I didn't find this motor difficult to tune, and I only include that because sometimes that's something that we need to be aware of. Some motors are a little bit more of a challenge to tune. I typically fly with the same props a lot of times, the Gemfan 2540 props. I really like those props. I haven't had any problems with them, and generally overall I find that they work well, at least for me, in what I'm looking for in flight. You may be looking for something else, and therefore might find a different prop suits you better and could yield more flight time too. And as you've probably seen from the flight video so far, that we've got a good amount of thrust here. This probably isn't the very most thrust I've seen before on an 1100 series motor. I do still think that the motors that come on the SkyStar's X120 are more powerful. They're actually more efficient as well. But this one performs very, very well. I did have a couple of crashes in my testing. I would say about 30% of my flights resulted in a crash. And they varied from anything from me just, skimming the ground and then toppling to burying it in the ground from doing a punch out over the house or something of that nature. Some of you have also asked me about going the other way, and the other way is a lot harder. Going from the open end to the garage side of the house, that hole is kind of daunting once you get up there in the air, and all you see is you're kind of aiming for the brown top of that little shed, and you don't have that much clearance, and the wind has to be just right for me to pull that off on very regularly. If we count every second, you'll note that the flight that we just viewed is going to be 2 minutes and 13 seconds. This is the flight I mentioned previously. This is on the G&B 4S 550, and this flight will go for about a little over a minute longer than the 450 flight did. And I'm really shooting for a flight time of 2 minutes and 30 seconds on a 450 4S milliamp battery. That's kind of not necessarily my ideal time, but I think that's a pretty good time, and I think most people would be fairly satisfied with that. You know, it all depends on how you fly. Do you fly like I do? Do you fly at the altitude I do, and the humidity? All those environmental factors that make little differences in your flight. You know, when you're talking about the difference between a 2 minute and a 2 minute and 30 second flight, all these things start to add up. Maybe you do more acrobatic moves, and therefore you're harder on the battery for a shorter period of time, possibly. These winding turns are kind of difficult for the battery to keep, you know, pushing those motors, and so therefore it just sucks all the juice right out of the motors, versus, you know, a punch and you hit it hard for just a moment and then you're back off. You know, if you're doing drag racing with your quads, then your battery's probably not going to last nearly as long. So there's a big variable there in the timing, but just to let you know what I'm looking for as far as the efficiency side is a flight on a 450 milliamp 4S that will get me 2 minutes and 30 seconds flying the way I want to fly. I kind of want to ask you guys a question. Would you rather see stuff like this, or do you want to see, you know, bench tests? I know there's several people that do a great job, and some of them make YouTube videos, I'm sure, of bench testing motors, but again, for me, it just didn't necessarily give the full picture. Tunability, how it flew, efficiencies, you know, you can get those numbers and you can work those things all up. It's not nearly as much fun than flying them, but they can give you most of that stuff. There's just the stick feel, and is it useful for me to kind of describe what I feel when I fly these motors? Because I do plan to keep doing this. It's one of the things that I think all our components in our quad are very, very important. But once you find a flight stack that you're comfortable with, we tend to go back to it. You might try new things on a different rig, but we tend to go back to the same stuff that we are tried and true for us. But we're always kind of looking for more out of our motors. So let me know if this is useful, if it's something that you enjoy. Does it influence your decision making on what motors to get, the things of that nature. I should add before the flight's over that these motors are available in many different places. You can find them on Amazon. You can get them directly from iFlight. You can also get them through Banggood. I think GearBest is also carrying them, and we'll probably find them in other web shops around the web. Are there motors that you want to see? I've already got the Emax 1106 4500s. We've flown those before on the Baby Hawk. I've also got the NickburnsRC 1206 motors. I've got some of those coming. I just got the collaboration motors between Racer Star and T-Motor. It's an interesting combo there. What motors have you seen out there for our micros that we need to give a go? Leave that in the section down below as well too. As you can see there, the arm time now is over 3 minutes, so that's good. That's about what I was expecting on a 550. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise about this motor, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.